Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Germany once again and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last few years, a couple of different styles, but I think it is fair to say that these days this brewery is best known for their different New England hazy IPAs, and it's also fair to say that these guys are one of the best known new generation of American style craft breweries that have popped up in Germany over the last few years. And it's fascinating to see actually the changes that are going on in the German beer scene at the moment. And these guys are one of the kind of front runners within that actually. So always nice to see them releasing new beers up here in Sweden. This is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget up here. So I have to say I'm very curious to see how it turns out. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Gundelfingen an der Donau. It's a little bit to the northwest of Augsburg, which you'll find between München to the southeast, Munich, and Stuttgart to the northwest, but it's a little bit closer to Munich, of course. And we're going to have a look at another beer from Frau Gruber Brewing. So this particular beer is called Trust Your Elephant. It comes in at 10.6% ABV, and this one is a New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, I hadn't seen anything from Frau Gruber in a little while. The last beer we reviewed from these guys was, of course, an Imperial Stout, but I think that was a little bit infected, to be honest with you. It was interesting, but a little bit strange. But when I saw this one coming through, I thought we need to take a little look at this. I'm a huge fan of elephants as well, so that was another thing that attracted me to this beer. You know, these creatures are just, you know, beautiful creatures. They seem to have this genetic memory where they know to have an extended family gathering at this place at this time. They're just absolutely fascinating. If you look at the satellite map of Africa, you can see these cracks, which are ancient elephant highways and stuff. Go and read about elephants. They're awesome, awesome creatures. But yeah, as I say, Frau Gruber, a very, very good new generation American style craft brewery in Germany. As I've explained to you in other German reviews, you know, it's very interesting to see what's going on in the German beer scene with these American style breweries popping up. Germany, of course, has a huge brewing heritage, so when the very well trained German brewers turn their attention to the American style craft beers, it's extremely interesting to see what they can do. I've mentioned on the channel before my good friend Daniel, who was the one that really got me into craft beer in the first place. He lives in Bamberg, and he's telling me that even the little local brauhouses in Bamberg are brewing beers from different regions of Germany, which is something they never really would have done before. So yeah, lots of very, very exciting things going on in Germany at the moment. Not just these American style craft breweries, but within the more kind of traditional brauhouses as well. So make sure you try some German beer. I absolutely love it, and I do have some more kind of traditional German beers back home in Scotland that I'll be reviewing for you over the next couple of weeks, so keep your eyes peeled. But in the meantime, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. The Trust Your Elephant 10.6% New England Triple IPA from Frau Gruber Brewing in Gundelfingen an der Donau, Bayern, Germany. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Frau Gruber Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the German beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, but not as often as I would like. Hopefully we can fix that in the future. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Frau Gruber Brewing. So, Frau Gruber Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gundelfingen an der Donau in Bavaria in the south of Germany, a little bit to the northwest of Augsburg. But the company was founded by Matthias Gruber and Enzo Frauenschuh, who were skate park friends from Augsburg. So Matthias had previously worked for a company that manufactured printing presses, but he went to Australia to work for a few months. While he was there, Enzo visited him and they went to drink craft beer because Enzo had studied at Weihenstephan Institute, which is part of the Technical University of Munich, and I believe that's in Freising, a little bit to the north of Munich itself, but he'd also been a brewmaster at a Riegele beer manufacturer for about 5 years as well. So quite a well-trained brewer, we have to say. A little bit later on though, in 2013, they founded a craft beer wholesale business together called Liquid Hops, and this focused initially on importing Belgian and American beers into Germany. Initially though, this was a part-time venture, but the demand for these Belgian and American style craft beers in Germany grew massively, and so Matthias decided to make craft beer his profession. But soon after this, the pair started homebrewing together and they sold their beers at their local market, where they proved to be hugely popular, and there was a lot of things going around these beers spreading. Word about these beers just spreading through people, person to person, word of mouth basically. But they decided then at this point they were going to go commercial with their brewing, and so they combined their names and chose Frau Gruber as the name of the brewery, Mrs. Gruber if you want to translate it into English. But they agreed with Markus Lohner of Kamba Bavaria Brewery that they were going to brew in the old Kamba Bavaria facility, and this brewery, as we've mentioned earlier, can be found in Gundelfingen and Donau. But over the years they've continued to expand their capacity and develop new recipes. They're known mainly for their New England hazy IPAs at the moment, but I have seen sour beers from them, Berliner Weisses and Goses and stuff like this. But they do a number of barrel-aged beers these days too, which are quite interesting. If you watched my last review from Frau Gruber, you'll see that was quite an interesting one. But as of March 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 150 different kinds of beer, and like I say, mainly known for those New England hazy IPAs. But that is all I can tell you about Frau Gruber Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So that's everything you need to know about Frau Gruber, but I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open the beer up. So as you can see, very nicely presented as you always get. There is the Frau Gruber symbol there. You can see a little bit of the kind of brewing apparatus and some motors and things like that in there. But yeah, it is a very, very nicely presented beer, this one. So it's a 440 milliliter can. Black top on it, of course. I want to say I paid 65 Swedish kroner for this. So that is €6.50, somewhere in the region of like £6 sterling, maybe about, $7.50, $8 American, for those of you watching over there, just so you've got a little bit of a price reference. And this was released as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden in early March of 2022. Another interesting story I have about Frau Gruber though is that when I was in Seoul in Korea, I was in the brew pub Meisterli Brewing, and I actually bumped into the main guy behind their marketing and sales and stuff like that over there, Daniel. So very, very nice guy. It was completely random. He saw me filming when I was there and then came up and asked me if it was, I was the guy from Rampant Lion Reviews, because he remembered he'd seen one of my videos when he saw me filming. So it was quite random to bump into him in Seoul in Korea and all places. He was going around Hong Kong and Seoul and stuff like this, so it was pretty interesting. But very, very nice guy, I have to say. But let's crack into this one then and see how we go. Trust Your Elephant, 10.6% New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA, from Frau Gruber in Gundelfingen and Donau. Incidentally, this beer is hopped with Galaxy, Nelson Sauvin and Citra. So Galaxy, of course, Australian hop, 14% alpha acid, big passion fruity notes. Usually a little bit, quite a bit of mango as well. Nelson Sauvin, New Zealand hop, 16% alpha acid, big white, green, grapey kind of characters. And then Citra, we know is the kind of classic American hop, 14% alpha acid once again, big juicy mango notes, but also a kind of big lemon limey character as well. So let's crack this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very, very curious about this. Oh, this is going to be a monster. You can just kind of tell actually. But yeah, hopefully it's in a good kind of fresh condition. I've always said in reviews, I've never been that convinced by the need for New England triple IPAs, but yeah, they're quite interesting beers anyway. This is one, as I say, that I just couldn't resist. So yeah, I do like a New England double at like a kind of 8%, but you know, the triples, I'm always like, yeah, they can be quite nice, but I've never, as I say, I've never seen the need for this style of beer. But anyway, you're getting quadruple IPAs that are like 12% and stuff like that these days, which is just mental. So anyway, as you can see, and as you would expect, this beer has poured absolutely beautifully. So the head on this one, before it disappears, it's poured to be about a 2/3 finger of quite a bumpy, I would say, kind of cream coloured head there. That looks very, very nice. But yeah, it looks good. So for me, in terms of colour, this beer is a very kind of deep yellow. I think it looks a little bit more sort of ambery to you guys on the camera, but to me, with the naked eye, it looks like a very kind of deep, rich yellow colour. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will play a role in the colour of your beer as well. But when it comes to New England IPAs, you don't really have to care about those latter 2 variables. It's more about the type of malts and the length of your wort boil. But yeah, I think it's fair to say this one is a very rich yellow colour. So in terms of the level of haze in this one, it's certainly not the soupiest and gloopiest of triple IPAs we've come across before, but it is pretty damn opaque. You can see that if I put my fingers behind the glass there. But this one does contain wheat malt, oat malt, and barley malt. So yeah, there are a few different things going on with this one actually. So yeah, the way that this goes together is pretty damn nice. So yeah, this is pretty much as you would expect from a New England IPA, this one. But I'm quite curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. So not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs, but remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oat content, wheat content, and to a degree the yeast as well actually. So yeah, there are a few different things going on in that. But in terms of what you'd expect from the appearance of this kind of style of beer, nothing overly surprising about this one. So yeah, let's have a look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Curious about this, very, very curious. Yeah, so this does smell quite nice. I'm going to say straight away, I can tell from this one, it's not in its freshest condition. And as I've said in previous reviews, you have to be careful with this when you're buying beers from Systembolaget here in Sweden, because some of the import companies are not that great at getting their beers out there in the Tillfällig assortment. They import them too early, they sit in the warehouse, and they just kind of age a little bit. So this one is not in its absolute prime condition. We have to remember that. But that's not Frau Gruber's fault. That's the import company, and to a degree it's Systembolaget's fault as well. But you know, there has to be better coordination between these guys too. But yeah, overall, the aroma of this beer is quite nice actually, I have to say. It's nothing surprising, but it does the job. So you can smell straight away, this one's got that lovely big kind of sort of bready malt base. This one, to me, just in terms of aroma, this one leans towards the bready side of the New England spectrum, but it's also got a good little bit of sweetness to it as well. But you'd expect that from a triple IPA. I think when you go up to, with New Englands especially, when you go up beyond that 8% mark, you really have to put a little bit of a sweeter barley malt in there to just cover up some of the booziness that you get out of the beer. So you can smell that going on in this one too. The green component isn't too assuming, I would say. Kind of leans towards the grassy side of things, and the fruity side of the beer is kind of to be expected from all these hops as well. You've got a little bit of you've got a good little mix of tropical in there, but you can certainly smell the Nelson Sauvin kind of standing out with this one. But yeah, the way that this beer goes together is pretty nice in the aroma. But let's break that down for you and go a little bit more kind of in depth with it. So in terms of the malty side of things then, backbone of this beer, you absolutely get a little bit of that kind of that white bread crusty thing there. It smells a little bit like that kind of hedgehog roll that you're going to get, but a good little bit of a kind of fluffy, fresh white bready character in there. But I think you can really smell the wheat thickening out this beer. Yeah, you can really smell the wheat just thickening out the everything in this beer, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I do get a little bit of oaty character out of the malt base as well. But as I've explained in previous reviews, when it comes to the oats in these New England IPAs, quite often these are a very good indicator of how fresh your beer actually is. Because the drier the oats smell, the older the New England IPA is likely to be, but the more kind of creamy they smell, the fresher it's likely to be. So yeah, the way that this one goes together in that regard is very, very nice. But yeah, aroma wise, this one on the malty side of things is quite nice. So the oaty character, you do get a little bit of smoothness out of it, and you can detect a little bit of that creaminess, but you can smell that the oats are starting to get a little bit drier. I don't know if this beer does have a canned on date. It says best before the 20th of the 10th, 2022, but fresh. It says fresh, best before, 20th of the 5th, 22. So it should still be in date in that sense. It doesn't, I think they really need to put canned on dates on these New England IPAs. Of course, if it's an imperial stout or whatever, you don't have to care that much about it, because those beers can age. They can age away quite nicely in cans or in bottles. But yeah, when it comes to the New England IPAs, they really need a kind of canned on date. But yeah, this one, you can smell the oats in this are a little bit kind of drier. But the other thing that we need to think about as well is that this may just be a little bit of a more kind of barley malt leaning New England IPA, or a little bit more of a wheaty leaning one. We'll kind of find that out, I guess, when we actually taste it. But yeah, for me, the malty backbone of this one, bread crust, white bread, the thickening wheaty layer. It doesn't really have a bitiness to the wheat in the back of the nose, I should say, but the oatiness is in there as well. And you do get a wee bit of that Werther's Original butter candy, butter candy sweetness out of it. So I do like how that goes together. Yeah, on the hoppy side of things, then you can smell there's a little bit of earthiness on the green component, but I find that this one really leans toward that more kind of floral note. Actually, the more that I smell of it, the more I'm getting a kind of floral aromatic character out of this one. There's also some nice kind of lighter grassy elements to it as well. And yeah, I generally speaking, I like how this beer goes about its business in that particular sense. So yeah, it works. It certainly works. Let's focus on the fruity side of things, just to round off the aroma. So yeah, as I say, for these hops, I know these ones pretty well. I do get a nice, lovely, juicy passion fruit out of this one. I'll say that. So a lovely, juicy kind of passion fruit out of this one, and that's going to be from both the Galaxy and the Citra in this. Big juicy mango as well. Again, that's from both of these hops. I do get a little bit of there is a wee bit of a kind of apricot-y, pineapple-y kind of thing going on. I think the apricot's most likely to come from the Citra, but the pineapple is most likely to come from the Galaxy. But of course, you get the Nelson Sauvin. Nelson Sauvin can be quite a dominant hop. You do get that lovely kind of white, green, grapey, almost gooseberry-like aroma out of these beers, or out of this beer, I should say. But yeah, the aroma of this one is very, very nice. The fruits are kind of nice and sharp and just very, very juicy. So this one gets a big thumbs up from me. I really like how this beer goes about its business. So yeah, big thumbs up to Frau Gruber for this one. As I always say though, take a little bit of time to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it's about time that we have a taste of this one then. So yeah, let's have a go at this one then. We'll put the rest of it in the glass and we shall have a taste. So yeah, let's go for it. So this one is the Trust Your Elephant, a 10.6% New England Triple IPA from Frau Gruber Brewing in Gundelfingen an der Donau in Bavaria, Bayern, in the south of Germany. Slange, skål, cheers, prost. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm going to say straight away, it's not at its freshest. And this is one thing, Frau Gruber need to keep an eye on that. If companies are importing their beers into Sweden, they need to make sure that they are getting here in good condition actually. I think that's been in the can for maybe about 3-4 months. I think it's a slightly older New England IPA, this one. You can just kind of tell when you're tasting it. But it's still in decent enough condition. The other thing we have to remember about this as well, the first impression I have of this beer though, is that it is a more kind of barley malt leaning and wheaty New England IPA. I think it's definitely fair to say that, but you can taste the kind of booziness in this one right away. It's a nice beer. It is a nice kind of drinkable beer, but yeah, as I say, it's not in its absolute prime condition. But unfortunately, when it comes to the Swedish and Norwegian, Finnish, Swedish, Norwegian, and I guess the Icelandic market as well, that's a risk that you kind of take with these New England IPAs. So yeah, just be aware of that when you're buying stuff that's imported. You're always better to go with the dark beers rather than the light New Englands like this. But yeah, as I say, it's still in fairly good condition, and it is a nice beer. So yeah, I think I need to try and get one of the Frau Grubers when I'm over in Copenhagen next time, because they will always be pretty fresh actually. But yeah, definitely a kind of barley malt leaning and wheaty kind of bitey New England IPA, this one. But yeah, it's quite nice, and in fairness, for a 10.4%er, it's pretty easy drinking as well. So, yeah, definitely kind of more barley malt leaning and wheaty one. As I've said to you, I think there's 6 different elements you have to care about with a New England IPA. They can be sort of farmhousey and yeasty leaning. They can be rye leaning and kind of grainy. Those two are more kind of prominent in American brewed New England IPAs, but they can be wheaty, bitey, oaty, creamy, barley malt bready, or they can be a little bit sweeter. And those elements, those latter 4 elements, are a bit more common in the European brewed examples of this style. But yeah, this is nice. This is pretty good. So let's break this down then. The first impression of this beer though, it's quite an oily, wet but barley malt leaning bready New England IPA. The green component is quite floral and the fruits are quite nice and oily. That's a basic summation of this beer. But let's give you a bit more of a detailed description. So in the middle third of the palate then, you can feel that nice kind of bread crusty malt base in there. And I actually find the grainy bread crust in this base, it has a little bit more of a almost very slightly toasty, grainy kind of character there. I do get a little bit of that out of it. But sitting on top of that, you can feel there's a nice kind of thin but dense layer of a kind of white bready character. But then on top of that, you can feel the wheat coming out of this one. And the wheat really thickens all of that out. But then on top of that, you get the oatiness and the nice oaty kind of creaminess to the beer. But yeah, I think that works pretty nicely as well. So yeah, as I say, kind of bread, as I say, bread crusty base to the beer, a little bit of a kind of toasty bread crust as well. A dense kind of white bready, base on the beer too, and then yeah, on top of that you get a little. I actually feel you get a little bit of brown bread out of this one, a little bit of a wholemeal bread, and you can really feel that thickening wheaty layer to the beer. And then on top of all of that, you get the kind of oaty notes out of it. Like I said, this beer is not in its prime, and oats are always a good tell of how old your beer is, because they start to get a bit drier and more powdery in terms of the flavour composition the further you go into it. But yeah, if you go down the kind of middle line, of your tongue there, you can feel that thicker oaty note out of it. And as you move out toward the sides of your palate, you can feel that it becomes a little bit more kind of dry and powdery and stuff like this. So yeah, I do like how that I do quite like how that goes together. So yeah, this one, you do get a little bit more oat out of it, and it sweetens up a wee bit the further that you go into the aftertaste as well. But you can feel that in the middle of that middle third of your palate, you've got a bit more. You get a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of vibe coming out of the beer. So that is quite interesting as well, actually. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, definitely leans towards a more kind of grainy, bready sort of thing the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, interesting stuff for sure on the malty side of things. So let's focus on the back third of your palate. I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate for just now. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there where you have that bread crusty, grainy sort of thing. Then the base of the back third of your palate is again a little bit more kind of bread crusty. You get a bit more of an intense kind of grainy sort of thing there on the back of the palate too. Remember, the more bitter flavours come out toward the back of the palate, the sweeter flavours come out more further forward. On top of that, you've got a slightly thicker kind of brown bready layer, and then on top of that, you can feel the kind of wheatiness just going back as well. So yeah, a few interesting things going on with this beer. Absolutely. So yeah, the wheatiness actually does give you a little bit of bitiness on that back third of the palate, but on top of all of that, you can feel the yeah, on top of all of that, you can feel the kind of yeasty character as well. So yeah, you can feel like a slightly more dense brown bready kind of character. There's a few woody, crackery elements to it, and it has a wee bit of an almost slightly spicy um, bread crusty note to it. But certainly on the back of the palate, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller there, but as you come further forward, it just squashes down and condenses a little bit more the further that you go forward into that middle third of the palate. But yeah, malty, yeasty side of things isn't overly surprising in this beer, but it is quite nicely done. So let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one, but quite quickly, when you move further forward, I think this beer develops a little bit of a kind of spicy, floral aromatic kind of vibe to it. And it does feel a little bit more bitter as well, I would say. I do like how it goes together in that regard. Yeah, a little bit. You do get a nice little bit of spiciness out of there. Remember, New England IPAs are more reliant on late addition hopping and dry hopping. So late addition hopping gives you a little bit of bitterness, but a lot of flavour and aroma. Dry hopping gives you it's completely flavour and aroma. Early addition hopping is the one that gives you the big bitterness, and West Coast IPAs use all three. New England IPAs only tend to use the late addition and the dry hopping. That's one of the main differences. But this beer does feel a little bit more bitter. You do get that nice kind of deep floral aromaticity, but you'd be very surprised with Nelson Sauvin. It can really give you a big kind of bitter kick like this. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've used a little bit of Nelson Sauvin as a kind of early edition hop with this one. It reminds me of the 100 series Nelson Sauvin that I had before from OO Brewing here in Sweden. That was really interesting to see what the Nelson Sauvin on its own could actually do. But round the front curve of the palate, the beer is a little bit lighter and grassy. It's got a wee bit of zestiness as well, which I suspect is most likely to come from the Citra, but potentially the Galaxy as well. But yeah, it works quite nicely in this one, I have to say. But yeah, the this beer, it grows on you. It definitely grows on you, but you can feel the booziness going to your head. Absolutely. So yeah, let's look at the fruity side of the beer then. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up there, a wee bit of bread crust. But you can feel the base of the front third of your palate. It's a little bit more, you do get a wee bit of the bread crust, a bit of a smooth white bread, and then on top of that, you get that nice oily, you do get that nice kind of oily character just coming out of it as well. But yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. I think this one goes together really nicely in that sense. So yeah, the fruity side of the beer, let's break that down for you. At the back of that front third of the palate, you do get a little bit of a kind of passion fruity. You do get a little bit of a kind of passion fruity note out of it. But I would say it's quite a strong passion fruit. But I think there's maybe even a wee bit of grapefruit in there. But yeah, Galaxy and Citra can both give you that. As you move further forward, the passion fruit kind of mellows out a wee bit. You start to get a little bit more. You start to get a little bit of a more kind of oily mango character out of it. yeah, you start to get a little bit of a more kind of oily, mango-y character out of this one, and you can feel, you know, there are little undertones of kind of apricot and maybe a bit of pineapple and stuff like that as well, just as you reach the kind of middle of that front third of your palate. But as soon as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, it's all about the Nelson Sauvin. You get that big white, green, grapey character out of it. It's got a wee bit of a gooseberry element as well, but you can feel a little bit of pineapple just kind of creeping its way over the top of that. Yeah, just creeping its way over the top of that more oily white, green grape kind of thing. But yeah, this beer, it doesn't, as I say, it doesn't do anything that's kind of overly surprising in a sense, but it just works very, very nicely, and it does grow on you as well. But as I say, the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, you do get a little bit more graininess out of this beer. You can feel it starts to lean towards the more kind of barley malty and wheaty side of the malt base. But yeah, nicely done. Certainly not the creamiest of New England IPAs, that's for sure, but it works. It certainly does work, but I don't think this one is at its freshest point in time. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour. Let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So yeah, in terms of mouthfeel, I would say that this beer, it's actually quite light for a 10.6%er. You would expect something a wee bit thicker than this. So I would say that this is at the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth. It's actually quite an oily and slick beer, this one, in a lot of ways. The malt base has a bit of graininess to it, a bit of smoothness, tiny little bit of sweetness too, which is worth checking out. But then, yeah, I think that sums it up quite nicely. In terms of IBUs, I think this one is about 40 or 50 IBUs. I'm leaning towards saying 50 because it does have quite a pungent floral component to it. So yeah, that's worth checking out. But the fruity side of the beer is quite balanced between the tropical side and the more oily Nelson Sauvin. But yeah, I do like how this one goes about its business. Absolutely gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. I think we can round off the review there. But yeah, a really interesting beer, this one. Certainly more kind of wheaty and barley malt leaning New England triple IPA for me, but very light in its mouthfeel for a 10.6%er, I would say. Pardon me as well. So yeah, we can leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Frau Gruber Brewing as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future. But yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media. Check out Frau Gruber's social media. This one was the Trust Your Elephant 10.6% New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Frau Gruber Brewing, Gundelfingen and Donau, near Augsburg in Bavaria in the south of Germany. Slange, Skål, cheers, Prost, and catch you guys on the next one.